The Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, President Zelensky, specifically noted that he strives for the absolute maximum, meaning as much as we can possibly afford of the weapons used for so-called deep strikes, attacks on the aggressor's territory to be carried out with Ukrainian-made weapons, as much as possible, of course, because it must be clearly understood that weaponry produced may, in one way or another, contain various foreign components and parts, elements that are absolutely necessary for this weapon to actually be used. And France, by the way, will be producing drones jointly with Ukraine. This is another piece of good news. Our integration and cooperation with the European Defense Industrial Complex. Overall, France had already started joint projects with Ukraine earlier. They concern the use and integration of artificial intelligence systems into targeting and guidance systems. This refers to artillery and rocket artillery weapons as well as drones. Therefore, the current strengthening of cooperation in terms of drones is important. You see, after all, no matter what, this component and element of warfare is evolving. And even Trump in the United States has already given instructions to strengthen protection against drones, to intensify efforts to counter possible threats from drones. Perhaps, of course, this is not related to any external factors, but rather because after Elon Musk's successful web operation and after the SBU destroyed Russian strategic aircraft, Musk actually praised Ukraine and said, you see, the future belongs to drones. So maybe Trump got so worried that Musk would attack him with drones and accordingly is actually planning to defend himself. By the way, we don't really know here, but getting back to what's happening, I've already mentioned that special operations are being carried out, for example, in Nizhny Novgorod region where the Lukoil oil refinery is burning on Russian territory. So, strikes are resuming, including on the oil refineries of the Rushka on Russian territory, and it's clear that our defense forces will be combining their strikes. And that's the right approach, because why should the strikes be combined? What's the point? You also often ask me about this topic in the comments. Why are such targets chosen? Why not strike others? It's very simple. You have to understand that the enemy needs to be cornered. You need to create problems for them. As soon as the Russians start getting used to the fact that certain objects are becoming the targets of our strategic strikes, for example, military airfields, military air bases, and so on. Or, for instance, facilities of the military-industrial complex. It is necessary to combine this and strike other targets as well, because they bring in air defense systems, because they deploy electronic warfare systems, and because the FSB starts to show intense activity in the form of counter-sabotage operations and measures. And accordingly, adjustments have to be made, because every operation, every strike has its own timing, its own opportunity, and its own window of possibility. That's why each of these targets is planned for individually. But I think the strategic intent is obvious. These are military targets, air bases, locations where enemy forces are concentrated, and missile weaponry. You know that in the Bryansk region this week, the Russian 26th Missile Brigade was hit at least twice. The detonation at the Bryansk airfield, the explosion of Iskanders, their launchers and missiles could be seen from far away, even beyond Bryansk. It was burning intensely because the missiles and their launchers were destroyed. And these missiles were ones the enemy intended and planned to use against Kyiv and possibly against Sumy and Kharkiv. In other words, our defense forces thwarted this attack. So the strikes will continue. I think we can expect more pleasant surprises ahead. Although, of course, we shouldn't expect that every operation will be as large scale as Pautina and that such things will happen almost every week. But I do think our Ukrainian defense forces have prepared some surprises. As for the front itself and the events taking place there, according to Deep State, the enemy has advanced near 2 more villages in the Sumy region. Efforts are being made there to hold back the enemy. I have already spoken about the intentions of the Russian forces to create a buffer zone. Why do they need this? They aim to pull our forces away, to disperse the reserves we have so that they can actually press from the northern flank, while at the same time carrying out offensive actions in the Donetsk region and their goal is to capture the Donetsk region within its administrative territorial borders. That's why we have to fight on two fronts. Because even though Sumy and Kharkiv regions may not be the enemy's top priority right now compared to Donetsk, which they want to capture completely, there is still containment happening there as well. We are constantly in a state of competition, trying to see who can contain whom, who can force the other to spread their forces thinner. The situation for Sumy and the Sumy region is indeed threatening. The enemy has had some tactical successes, but certain measures are being taken to weaken the enemy's potential, including in the area. For example, the 4th Special Operations Forces Regiment Ranger released a video showing how they are fighting and truly engaging in combat in the Kursk region, carrying out local counterattacks, taking action, and even capturing Russian prisoners at the same time. In other words, the Special Operations Forces are working, as are the forces of other units, territorial defense, ground forces, and of course the air assault forces, all working to stop the enemy. At this time, the Special Operations Forces are counterattacking, and we can see that they are actively moving around the Kursk region, delivering painful blows. And this is also the right kind of sabotage work behind enemy lines, very much the right approach. Meanwhile, sources in Ukrainian intelligence who inform the media say that in the coming weeks, Russia will increase pressure on the front and combine this with its missile and drone strikes. We'll see if they attempt any new launches of the Reshnik. Maybe this time it won't fly to Kazakhstan, but straight to Beijing, to China, so that Xi Jinping and his comrades in the Chinese Communist Party start to understand a few things. But the risks are precisely in the strikes. You can see that Russian attacks are cyclical, they go in circles. The past day demonstrated this. A concentrated strike on Kharkiv, before that on Kharkiv, before that on Kiev. Right now the enemy is acting. That is, about a month ago they carried out similar strikes, and a month and a half ago as well. Odessa, Kropivnitsky, other cities, Kiev, again Kharkiv, Kherson. So now the enemy is combining, then the enemy was combining these actions. They were striking different regions across our country, dispersing, so to speak, their activity, this offensive in the air. And now, once again, they are returning to the tactics that they used before and are trying to strike more concentratedly, terrorizing the civilian population, specifically in certain cities, especially the million-plus cities. Dnipro, Kiev, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia. This is clearly noticeable. The enemy may focus specifically on this kind of terror. And, well, there is no trend indicating that the number of drones will decrease. Although I wouldn't rule out strikes on, once again, Yelabuga in Tatarstan, places, locations where Shaheds are produced and stored, as well as other sites where drones may be kept or manufactured. We can see that reconnaissance is being carried out and systematic work is underway to identify and locate such sites, including launch platforms. Therefore, it is obvious that Russia will try to make the most of the summer to achieve its goals, primarily the capture of Donetsk region, putting pressure on Sumy and Kharkiv regions and attempting to stretch our forces. We, in turn, will focus on striking deep into enemy territory, on attacks against the occupied territories, on raids by our Special Operations Forces, the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, Special Forces, and all other components in order to weaken the enemy from within. Plus, I think the number of our strikes will increase. For every Russian strike, there will be retaliation from us with a drone. And I hope that integration with the Europeans will bear fruit. We will receive assistance, and eventually Donald Trump will come to his senses, and the United States will continue to support the use of them, if not by providing free, non-repayable aid, then at least by selling to us